So thanks, Annie, for welcoming everybody here. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the launch of Working in Good Ways, a framework and resources for Indigenous community engagement. We just wanted to begin today by acknowledging that we're coming at you from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and that this land is shared Métis and First Nations jurisdiction. We'd also like to recognize the signatories to Treaty 1, which is a living agreement that governs our relationships with this place. So Broken Head, Saugeen, Long Plain, Peguis, Roseau River, Sandy Bay, and Swan Lake First Nations. And then we also want to acknowledge the territories that some of the folks that we consulted and partnered with for this project are coming from, including Treaty 1, Treaty 5, and Treaty 5 adhesion. Mapuche territories on the island of Chiloé, Quechua territories in the province of El Napo, and Yucatec and Quechimaya territories in what is currently known as Belize. And so we welcome you to share the territories that you're tuning in from in the chat. And we'll just get into things. So my name is Nikki Furland. I'm the CEL Coordinator Indigenous and Community Engaged Learning, where I work with my colleagues Annie Chen and Hera Vijagran, as well as a great team of student staff to create opportunities for students to learn from and with communities. In recent years, we've placed work with Indigenous communities across the Americas at the center of our work and refocused the pedagogical aims of our programs to helping students develop the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary for working in good ways with Indigenous communities. The framework that we're sharing today is one part of an Indigenous Initiatives funded project that set out to explore how we could work better with Indigenous communities with whom we were developing and facilitating these different community engaged learning opportunities. And we'll speak a little bit more about the framework and the resources shortly. And first, we'd like to begin by just acknowledging our distinguished guests. I see lots of, I can't see all of your faces, but I do see some folks that we consulted here. And so I just want to recognize our community partners who've joined our gathering today as well. We're grateful to all of the elders, teachers, mentors, partners, and everybody who participated in the consultations to help us understand what it means to work in good ways. We hope that the framework becomes a tool that you use to strengthen your institutional partnerships. We just have a couple of protocols and reminders to share with you before we get started. So we're going to keep folks muted for this section of the presentation. If you'd like to share questions or comments, you're more than welcome to do so in the chat. If there is something that you want to share out loud after the presentation, we're going to have a kind of Q&A discussion, so you can stick around for that, please. And then finally, as Annie mentioned at the beginning, but I know some new folks have joined, we are recording this session to share with folks who weren't available to join us today. If you don't want to be part of the recording, you can simply turn your video off. And then just quickly overview of what today is going to look like. So the plan for today is to hear from several community and university speakers about their partnership experiences. And then we're going to quickly introduce the framework, the project, and some of the resources that we're launching today. And then afterwards, as I mentioned, we're going to have a quick Q&A and discussion with those who can stick around, who might not have other meetings to rush off to. And so first, Elder Keith Anderson is going to share some thoughts and welcome everybody to the launch. So I'd like to invite Annie to introduce her Elder Keith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nikki. So Keith Anderson is a Rocky Cree elder who lives on the Churchill River in Leaf Rapids, Manitoba. Keith has worked with the University of Manitoba in various ways, but our connection is his support for our CEL program, Leaf Rapids Northern Community Engagement, which brings students to the community of Leaf Rapids for about a month every spring, pre-pandemic times. More importantly, though, Keith is family. We met on my first CEL program trip to Leaf Rapids in May of 2015. And I have a vivid memory of sitting with Keith in a community member's living room. He had asked me quietly to come have a conversation with him, and little did I know what was coming. He asked questions, gave space, and gently pulled out from me my dreams and worries. And soon enough, I was crying quietly, surrounded by my students who were engaged in their own conversations. And when I talked to them later, they didn't actually know or realize. It was as though we were in a bubble of our own. This is what Keith does as an elder. He helps us to understand ourselves and how we belong to community and the land. And I always warn my students about this private moment that will come during their program in Leaf Rapids, and this kind of special relationship that Keith tries to establish with the students and help them along their journey. So we have a recording from Keith, a conversation that he had had with Nikki. As some of you know, the internet in Northern Manitoba can be really unreliable. And so we're going to play that for you now.
Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Keith Anderson, and I'd like to say hi to everybody and welcome you to the meeting. Well, working with the university and other institutions, I think is very rewarding, and especially with us in the northern region here, there's a connection that we both share with the university students, and I think both university students as well as ourselves benefit in the learning process because they bring new ideas and they also sit there and we share like our culture and our ways with them as well. And it's a great exchange between both identities. I think working with the university is a great thing, and then I'd love to see more of it happen. And what would even be great if the university had a place up north here, where we're not so far apart, and that we can sit there and collaborate like with education and everything else, and work together with the communities and that. And then I think that would build a more stable foundation and the connections as well, and the accessibility to. We can bring the north to the south, and then we can bring the south to the north.
Exactly.
And then we can sit there and then in collaboration, working each way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Until we sit there. And then by doing that, you establish a relationship. You also sit there and then, people at the university can sit there and listen to different ideas in that. But let alone if we could work together and tweak it, the university with the community. Mm-hmm. Okay, what do we need? What do we want to see? We just got to sit there and pull each other closer and tighter.
So those were remarks by Elder Keith Anderson, and you could probably hear I forgot I was not muted at the end of that conversation and was very excited about Keith's ideas. But so we just want to thank Keith so much and wish that he could be here with us, but as Annie mentioned, his internet's not the best, which is the common experience in Northern Manitoba and elsewhere. So, but if you want to learn more about the Leaf Rapids Northern Community Engagement Program, please don't hesitate to contact Annie, who's the coordinator. And now I would like to introduce Christine Sear, who brings greetings from the Office of the Vice President, Indigenous. And we'd like to congratulate Christine on her new posting as Associate Vice President, Indigenous Students, Community and Cultural Integration. Christine is a Métis woman and the former director of the Indigenous Student Center. And in those roles and in her earlier work has nurtured many relationships with community partners. So I will mute myself.
Thank you. Thank you for that welcome, Nikki. And thank you for inviting me to be here today. Tanchikia, Ganamik Nuakwe, Indigenous Masabe Dodem, Winnipeg and Donji. I'm here in Winnipeg, where I was born and raised. These are the unceded and original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and this is the homeland of the Métis Nation, of which I'm a proud member. I acknowledge that the life-giving water that sustains us in Winnipeg comes from Shoal Lake First Nation in Ontario, and that the electricity that is allowing us to see and talk with each other today comes from Treaty 5 territory. I acknowledge my family and ancestors who have taken care of this land for thousands of years, and I commit to continue that legacy. So I am here today to bring a welcome on behalf of the Office of the Vice President Indigenous and Dr. Catherine Cook, who couldn't be here today. A few weeks ago, Nikki contacted me and asked me to read the framework. And she said, it might take you 2 to 3 hours to read. And I kind of chuckled, and she wasn't kidding. It took me a little while to read. I've now read it several times, and each time that I do, I learn something new. And I have had more time through reading that to be reflective and to think about my own experiences and how those experiences with community and relationship have really shaped my life and my work. So it does take time to read, just like it takes time to build relationships that are essential to doing our work in a good way. We've been reminded that doing the work before the work, which is the reflection, the literacy building, and the preparing, is only the first part of it. The communication, the listening, the humility, the honesty, and the commitment of time, that's the next part of it. And all of these make up the circle of reciprocity in our relationships to community and to each other. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to listen to one of our elders and teachers, Maria Campbell, and she said something that was so profound and has stuck with me and really applies here. She said that our stories are medicine. So to Nikki and Annie and Hedda, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, your work, and your stories with us. This is medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. That it means so much to us because this project has really been such a journey that's involved, literally over 100 people at this point. So spanning 3 years, and so it's exciting and feels kind of really momentous to finally get to this point where we're sharing it with everybody else. So I'm really glad that you had the chance to read it, and it sure is a lengthy document, but we hope that folks will find it useful in their own partnership context. So I'm going to share my screen again really quickly. So that we can, I'm just going to take a few minutes to introduce the project, and then Annie's going to talk a little bit about the framework and resources that we're launching today, and then we're going to return back to our community and university speakers. This is our stages, our pathway for Indigenous community engagement. It feels a little bit like this project as a whole. As I mentioned, it's literally been a 3-year journey and lots of twists and turns, but totally worth it. So this project actually started back in 2017. And actually is in part the reason that I work here at the University of Manitoba. So I was hired to take on some really cool and interesting Indigenous programming, but in addition to that, to lead the consultations for this proposed framework project. So our office had realized in the course of our engagements with Indigenous and other community partners that there were areas of our partnership engagement that we could improve, where we were causing, harm, some minor and some, maybe not so minor, and where we weren't working in good ways. Sometimes because of the institutional policies and procedures and ways of working that we felt kind of beholden to. So we set out to consult with the community partners that we were working with about how we could work better with Indigenous communities when we're trying to develop and facilitate these community engaged learning opportunities. And so though we developed the framework and resources for a community engaged learning audience, they are available to the public and others who might find what we shared to be useful in their own partnership contexts. So over the course of the project, we consulted with nearly 100 individuals representing over a dozen nations, including CEL partners from Anishinaabe, Cree, Quechua, Maya, and Mapuche communities in Winnipeg, Northern Manitoba, Belize, Chile, and Ecuador. Their guidance and knowledge and experience have informed all aspects of the framework, from our approach to the consultations all the way to the literal design of the framework guide and how it looks and how you're going to read through it. And so their stories breathe life into the framework, and their words, their voices literally reach up to you from every page. So there are a couple of other resources that also accompany the guide that are part of this project that we're working on. This is actually phase 1 of a much larger project. So those include an online course for students and a community of practice for people working in Indigenous community engagement and community engaged learning that's designed to support, advise, and share resources. And then Head is actually going to introduce those later, but first we're going to talk about the framework and principles. So I'll hand it over to Annie.
So what you see on your screen right now is an infographic that the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning helped us to create. During the consultations, we heard time and again that engaging Indigenous communities in partnership work is all about relationship. First, building relationships with the community and then taking care of those relationships. Real whole relationships are a core principle of the framework. And you can see this reflected in the pathway because we normally think of partnership, I think, as forming, maintaining, and closing, but we learn through the consultations that there is work before the work, and there's also the relationship after the work. Next slide, please. So within the framework guide, we have 7 distinct principles for Indigenous community engagement that emerge from our consultations, including relationship, as well as the 5 clear stages. A lot of the rich relational parts of working with Indigenous communities happens in those first and last stages, and these are some of the beautiful icons that the center helped us to prepare to represent the 7 principles, which are literacy, reflection, relationship, reciprocity, protocol, humility, and collaboration. The framework guide contains art, quotes, stories, reflection, questions, and supplementary resources to help readers engage with the principles in different ways. There are also 2 additional resources that are available for download on our website along with the framework. The practitioner workbook contains learning exercises that help you reflect on the principles and engage with the practices, including literacy homework, reflection worksheets, mapping exercises, and more. The relational assessment guide is a self-reflection tool and conversation guide for assessing the relationships that are at the center of the university community partnerships that we hold. So this is a guide that will help you create your relational assessment practices that you will use on your own and also with your partners. We're creating other tools and resources as well to supplement the framework, and these will come over time, and we'll also have printed home versions of the chapters and glossary available on our website in the future.
Thanks, Annie. So I'm just going to take a super quick second to talk about the cover of the framework. So you can see it here in various forms. So this landscape essentially brings together some of my memories from canoe trips, but also literally some of the scenes from northern Manitoba, where we started actually our consultations. So they stick out to me as being some of the first that we did. And so I wanted this scene to sort of evoke, it has a Manitoba feel, but it isn't necessarily set here. And I wanted the landscape to sort of look a little bit like a journey. There are places to go, there are bends in the river, to remind us that the process of community engagement, Indigenous community engagement, is a journey, that it takes a lot of time, it takes real concerted planning, and that it's intentional work, right? It's not just going to happen in a good way. We have to make sure that we work in a good way. And so there are visual cues throughout this landscape that are symbolic of things in the framework. So firstly, there are these stepping stones, 5 stepping stones that represent the 5 stages on the pathway to Indigenous community engagement. And it's a reminder too that it's not necessarily linear. You may, jump back and forth among these stones, that you don't just have to go essentially from 1 to 5, that you might return to the work before the work, and you might return to other stages too in the course of your partnerships with communities. There are also 7 trees and 7 cattails that represent the 7 principles of our framework, which Annie listed earlier. But other sort of, more implicit, I should say, symbols of the framework are things like the jack pines. So again, this reminiscent of northern Manitoba, but what's beautiful about jack pines is that they really adapt to their environment, right? To the wind and the currents, and they grow in a particular way so that they'll be stronger against these sorts of elements. And I think that reminds us as practitioners to be really adaptable, right? To work in ways that work for the community, and to learn to relate in ways that the community relates. And then also these different trees, this like forest, it's not just 7 birch trees, it's these 3 different trees represented here, but just this reminder that we're part of this interdependent ecosystem. We have these diverse relationships that ultimately benefit our collaborations, but also enrich our own lives. And the sunrise for me was like this reminder to start working in a good way. So it was like a sunrise on good work. That's just a little description of our cover if folks are interested. And then we're going to move on now, and Hedda is going to introduce our next speaker.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. So lots of comments on the chat about how beautiful the cover art was, Nikki, in case you haven't seen it. So as we've mentioned a number of times, the heart of the framework is made with knowledge, care, and relationships we are fortunate to share with community partners across the Americas. So next we'll hear from one of these communities. Sorry, was I muted this whole time?
No, you're good to go. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So, so next we'll hear from one of these communities. The collective name is MICA, Movimiento Insular Comunidad Artística. They're a women's collective of performance artists located in the archipelago of Chiloé in Chile. With their office, they are co-creators and co-facilitators of the program Chile Art, Community, and Resistance, and the art-based research project Raíz, which translates to roots. I met Mika in 2016 while I was living in the island of Chiloé. I'll never forget the feeling of seeing them perform for the first time. It was like coming home. Over the years, we have shared a lot of memories, a lot of good times, hard times, and in a very big way, they have become my mentors and role models for my own professional and personal life. We've traveled together, so they have a very, very special place in my heart. To accommodate non-Spanish speakers today, Mika has produced and subtitled a video to share a few words about what it means for them to work in a good way in and from community. So I'm gonna share my screen now and we'll watch the video.
Movimiento Insular es una comunidad artística que nace el año 2013 en Chiloé, enfocada principalmente a las artes escénicas. Surge como una propuesta hacia la colectivización de nuestras prácticas y disciplinas, construyendo horizontalmente un lenguaje creativo propio y pertinente. Posibilita la creación, gestión y producción de actividades artístico-culturales que potencien el habitar de su geografía. Cree y crea en la transformación de la sociedad a partir de sus herramientas artísticas. Como organización de mujeres que habitamos el mundo del trabajo artístico, sentimos que es importante rescatar en primer lugar el vínculo de profundo amor y arraigo que nace de la vida comunitaria, ese que va mucho más allá de la visión mercantil del trabajo, sino que más bien constituye nuestra forma de contribuir a la transformación de la realidad social, a través de la entrega de nuestra amada labor. Desde ese lugar, rescatar el arte que nace de este territorio y sus comunidades es el alimento inspirativo que da fuerza a nuestra creación y asimismo la entrega de nuestro arte en las diversas disciplinas, a través de talleres, clases, presentaciones, etc. Hacen que poco a poco, con el paso del tiempo, los vínculos se fortalezcan y den origen a relaciones honestas de profundo amor y reciprocidad. Desde este lugar, el trabajo para y con la comunidad es la forma que habitamos el hacer de nuestra labor, un medio que aporte hacia la transformación social, en el rescate de este archipiélago que vive, respira e inspira, y que cada día lucha por romper con el extractivismo y el colonialismo. Desde el año 2018, sostenemos un diálogo de cooperación, creación e investigación con Gerardo Villagrán, quien ha sido el interlocutor entre la Universidad de Manitoba y nuestra comunidad, posibilitando encuentros e intercambios entre estudiantes y funcionarios de dicha casa de estudios y comunidades de nuestra amada América del Sur, específicamente de Archidona, Ecuador, y Chiloé, Chile. A pesar del tiempo y la distancia, a pesar de pandemias y confinamientos, este vínculo se ha fortalecido y ha potenciado la idea de que pese a todo, siendo comunidad, somos más fuertes. Movimiento Insular es una comunidad artística que nace el año 2013.
Okay, little technical difficulties there at the end. So that is Mika, again, one of our partners. I really love every time I hear them speak, and you can get an idea of the kind of feelings and thoughts and experiences that they brought into our framework. So next, I want to introduce our following speaker. So the following speaker is Lisa Mendez, who will be, so Lisa is the interprofessional practice coordinator in the Office of Interprofessional Collaboration in the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences. In 2019, Lisa and I traveled together to the Amazon region of Ecuador to explore a potential partnership opportunity between one of our community partners, the Mupakin Collective, CL, and the Office of Interprofessional Collaboration. I feel like I should have pulled a photo from our hike here, Lisa, but I didn't. So we'll hear from Lisa, and yeah, we'll give the mic to her now.
Okay, does that look right to you guys? I can't
We see your view of it.
Oh shoot. Now my heart's racing.
No worries, Lisa. Why don't we, what I would recommend is sharing this screen, setting it up first to get your slideshow going, and then share screen, selecting the right screen to share with us.
How are we doing now?
Yes, you're good.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So now you're going to get my side profile. So thank you, Hera, for introducing me. My name is Lisa Mendez. I'm a white settler who was born and raised in Treaty 2 territory, who also has 3 children. Cierra la puerta, por favor. Sorry about that. And so I'm really excited to be presenting here today. I feel like I also started the work that I'm doing in 2017. And so it is so fun for me to now see where community engaged learning is and where I am as well, just being able to see that growth and everything. And so what I want to share with you today is a little bit about some program that I coordinate that I'm super excited and passionate about, which of course is on hold because of COVID, that was originally called the 2-week interprofessional experience in a rural and remote Indigenous community. And I feel like I need to just give a little bit of a context of where I started this position. And this is kind of my memory, and I'm sure the words weren't this blunt, but it was create opportunities for students from different health professions to come together in rural and remote regions so that they can be exposed to, something beyond the perimeter and work together. And what it has now morphed into is a name, is Nadeno Imaganak is the name of this program, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in a bit, but meaning all my relations in Anishinaabe and just kind of how that has come to be. And so the program that I have the privilege of coordinating, where we landed, because we realized we couldn't have in the health sciences programs, we realized that we couldn't realistically get our students to do their practice-based experiences that are part of their program in community at the same time. So we kind of landed on what was kind of a service learning model, where we would bring these groups of students together for two weeks in community, and they have a faculty facilitator that will come into the community for the first 3 to 5 days. So this is somebody who is in the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences, and we've been really privileged to get some funding from the RBC Experiential Learning and Travel Initiative. So here's just some pictures from some of the communities that the students have been to. And what I learned quite quickly is, although I am a therapist I'm an occupational therapist who has predominantly worked in rural and remote regions prior to coming to the university, I am still a non-Indigenous person who, needs, I just didn't feel like I was in a good place to be able to prepare our students to be able to go into these communities. And so I was just very lucky to have relationships with folks in Ngomazin. And so for those of you who know Ngomazin, there's 3 pillars. The education folks provided a lot of guidance and support around preparing the students to go into community and offer a sharing circle before the students go to community and then when they come back. And then Ngomazin Health Services, because they are so well connected with our First Nations communities where they provide health services, they were really instrumental in helping me to establish relationships for our students. And so to date, so this is pre-COVID, I have had 61 students from 9 different health profession programs in 8 different communities so far. And here, for those of you familiar with the map of Manitoba, these are the communities where I've had my partnership. So the blue is where Winnipeg sits here in Treaty 1 territory. The red arrows are pointing to the communities where our students drove, and the green arrows are where the students flew. And in that first year, it was a mix of kind of giving suggestions of what we thought the students could learn, but I would say it probably it started off with the university very much guiding what we'd hoped the students would learn, but we quickly learned that it made a lot more sense for the communities to really be the folks that were guiding the what they wanted students to learn. And so sometimes kind of starting with that blank slate can be a little bit overwhelming. So I might offer suggestions of the kinds of the things that students might be exposed to, or, last year in this community, this is kind of what the 2 weeks look like. But then from there, the communities really showcase from their own perspective what they would like future health professionals to learn about health. And, I very much explain that we teach, here and within our classroom walls in Winnipeg, and this is their chance to get out and hear other perspectives. What's different about this than what typically will happen in a practice-based environment is that our students spend a lot of time beyond the health systems. And so they will be out on the land. They will, be depending on what's meaningful for the community and thinking about what is meaningful from health and wellness from that community's perspective. And so, here we've got a picture of a feast that occurred outside, and two of the groups have had the privilege of going camping with community members because that's something that they would traditionally do. And so this just gets students to just really get that chance to understand in ways that they would never learn in my classroom. And it's those little stories like being involved in the food sovereignty gardening programs where they're weeding next to community members all day long, or they're going out and having, who can pick the most berries and the plumpest berries, and sharing stories. And, that kind of thing is where the students really report that's where most of the magic happens. And every student comes back talking about fishing, and the students are very competitive about who gets the biggest fish and the most fish. But we had to disqualify this physio and OT student because we found out that they were cheating. Here's another photo here of a med student and a nursing student who learned how to make their own ribbon skirts, which they were able to wear in a ceremony that occurred later on in their experience. And here's another, we started off being very prescriptive of when the dates would occur because it worked well for our schedule and all that kind of stuff. But one of the communities said, it would be really great if you could change the dates so that our students could help support the Sundance. And so we were like, well, let's do that. And so the students were really helpful in all the work that goes beyond this, behind the scenes to support that and everything. And it was just such a privilege and honor. Because we've had our roots in service learning, we do typically have a community identified project unless it's going to burden the community. So often we look quite broadly at projects. So it might be, just helping with gardening, or treaty days is coming up and they need supplies, for that. Or, they almost always are encouraged to meet with youth in the community to talk about health careers in general and that kind of thing. I just want to quickly showcase this, that we did do a qualitative research study of the students who've come back from this experience. And so this is kind of a visual of what our results look like. And I'd love to, I don't have time to go into the deep piece of things, but what I do want to highlight is the one big circle of the Nadeno Imaganak. And my co-researcher and I are both white settlers, and we partnered with Elder Margaret LaValle and Leslie Spillett. And we were trying to explain all these, Western boxes and our themes and everything. And they just, looked at us and said, that's Nadeno Maganak. This is all the connection to each other, to the people, to the land. This is where that, and so that's where the name for the program emerged. The other circle I want to highlight is the Finding My Place. And I don't want to oversell that sending students in for 2 weeks is going to, but what was really interesting is at the end of this, a number of the students were able to say, I could see how I could fit in as a settler to be able to, provide health services. And and that kind of thing. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that a number of my students have gone on to take jobs working in First Nation communities. And when those jobs fell apart because of travel restrictions, many of them retrained to be COVID testers and vaccinators. And so here are some of the students who went to Grand Rapids, Norway House, and to Edmonton, who are still working in community. And I just these slides here are actually from another presentation that I had done to some interprofessional folk about this experience. And it's going to resonate so strongly with Nikki, Annie, and Hera, because as I was kind of learning alongside these guys, you guys were working through your project, and I just kept saying, oh my goodness, I wish you had this framework work when I was doing this work and everything. And so you'll just see like how that strong relationship, that don't be a dam, go with that flow. The community needs to decide without being burdened, like what's in it for the community. There's so much undoing we need to do for students to be in health profession programs. They need to be A-type. They need to be checklists, and all this, and then we need to unteach that kind of thing. And we don't just go in and diagnose and treat and all of those kinds of things. And then I just learned a lot from just in talking with you and with around my own role and my positionality and my bias. And it was just so relieving to hear that, yeah, some of our rules don't work and they don't make sense. And how do we which ones do we scoot around and which ones do we duck under, and how do we do those kinds of things. So and so I just like to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to share with you today. Miigwech.
Thank you, Lisa, so much for sharing. I think it's really interesting for folks to hear about these different kinds of community engaged learning experiences that students have and opportunities that are offered in different units and faculties across the university. So there is a lot of community engaged learning happening, both in sort of internships and job shadowing and service learning and these different opportunities you just shared with us. So thanks so much for that. I laughed out loud when you showed the photo of the girl holding the fish. So that was very funny. I'm going to pause the recording very quickly and just pass it over to Hedda to talk about the next steps in our project.
Awesome. So thank you, Nikki. Just as we're coming to the end of the first part, I wanted to tell you about a few additional parts of the project that we've mentioned throughout the session and that will be released soon. So one of those things is new tools and resources and separate chapters of the framework guide that will be available for download on our website. So I encourage you to come back or to visit the website in a few weeks if you're interested in more of these pedagogical tools and resources. Also, as we mentioned before, we'll be starting a community engaged learning community of practice in June. So this will be a space for folks who work with community at different levels in the university to come together, share experiences, grievances, solutions, resources, and begin to create some sort of community of practice at the U of M. It will happen through monthly virtual gatherings. So stay tuned for more information. If you've signed on to our newsletter, you'll receive info through that. Lastly, as we also mentioned before, we are developing a Learn course based on the framework Working in Good Ways. And the aim of the course is to prepare students to learn from and with Indigenous communities. So the framework is written for practitioners. So people like Nikki, Annie, myself, Lisa, who work with students and community. But this course will be specifically designed for the student experience. And it will also provide foundational knowledge about Indigenous histories, cultures, and experiences. But that's not the focus because those resources already exist. It will be on how to work with community from the student perspective. So you can expect that to be completed by the spring 2022. So we finished the framework and now we're jumping into another project right away. You can learn more about these components and find any new resources at the link that Annie is going to drop in the chat. And yeah, thank you. I'll pass it back to Nikki for just a few closing remarks.
Thanks, Hedda. So I have just a couple of closing remarks, as Hedda mentioned, and then we're going to kind of open our Q&A. Somehow we are just perfectly on time, and I think this is the first time it's ever happened to me. I was answering some comments in the chat, so I may repeat some things that Hedda said here, but hopefully not. But again, for folks who do have to jump off the call now for other meetings or other work, please subscribe to our mailing list and that chat. I saw Annie throw that link in the chat. And so now I invite you to visit our website, and Annie is going to drop the link to our website, our project webpage, into the chat. And if you scroll down, you will find the 4 resources available for download. So the framework, the practitioner workbook, the relational assessment guide, and the infographic that we shared today. And like Hedda said, check back often because more stuff is under construction right now. And also, so you can obviously download a printed copy or an electronic copy of the framework right now. We will be making these sort of printable copies at home too that are, white background. But if you do want to order a printed copy of the framework, we will be printing a set. And so if you complete a pre-order form by June 30th, Annie will put the link to that pre-order form in the chat as well. We have a suggested donation amount for that framework of $10, which includes regional shipping, and all of that money will actually go towards supporting CEL opportunities for both students and partners. And we encourage you to share the framework with your colleagues and other people too. So we just want to thank you so much for coming to our celebration of the framework today. And for those who are able, we hope that you stick around for some discussion and Q&A, and we'll be, I think, showing you some images from the principal chapter art. So something to look forward to.